But I think all of this to say, is that spirituality and healing are not one size fits all. There is no one right vessel or approach. The sensitivities of the soul and the subtleties of the heart are just too mysterious for that. And we often see a view out there in the spiritual marketplace that, whether implicit or otherwise, that, oh, just do this one practice or this one technique, or there's this one kind of ultimate realization, and that's going to touch and illuminate each and every one of the dimensions or chambers of the body, the soul, and the heart. But in my experience, it just doesn't really work like that. Reality is just too vast. The heart is just too vast. It's endless. We're not going to wrap it up into some nice, tidy YouTube video. I mean, I often receive questions about this, about the different approaches and the different teachers and the different types of meditation and inquiry and yoga, and which one is best and how do they all fit together and what do we do when they contradict one another and which one is more evolved and how to make sense of it all. And I think if we start to see the various therapies and spiritualities, ways of both waking up and growing up, because we really need both. We see a lot of examples of one without the other. And we could also include cleaning up, really, to borrow a phrase from Ken Wilber, which points to the importance of shadow work and tending to unconscious process on the spiritual path. But that each of these different types of vessels contain and illuminate experience in different ways, utilizing distinct types of heat, of flame, of marination, of spicing, of cooking, different flavors and qualities of awareness and love, we might say. I mean, to give an example, there are some, and I was just speaking with someone about this, that there are some psychological and spiritual approaches that focus primarily on thought, right? And modifying sort of our patterns of thinking, inquiring into our thinking. And of course, this can be really helpful at times, and also quite necessary to really clarify and transform deeply rooted habitual beliefs that we have about ourselves and reality that are stored and carried through time and even across generations, right? In what we call a narrative or a story or a schema. But like any one method and approach, this will also have its blind spots, its unconscious or shadow side. And the shadow side of a cognitive-based, thought-based inquiry is that it isn't going to be able to be sensitive enough, tactile enough to unearth, to touch, to illuminate, to transform emotional and somatic pure material which emerged sort of prior to the acquisition of language, or for other reasons is nonverbal, meaning it's held in the body, deep in the somatic unconscious and our muscles and our cell tissue, and just isn't reachable by way of a conceptual based inquiry. It's not about thinking. And no matter how deeply we transform the way we think and restructure our thought and inquire into our thought, we're not actually reaching that material. It's overly reductive, misattuned, insensitive, to really assume that thought-based inquiry, working with patterns of thinking and cognitive beliefs, is going to be subtle enough to adequately tend to the full spectrum mystery that I think that really is the human person. And in addition to a symbolic mind, we have a living body, a luminous soul, and we're also pure spirit. And each of those must be midwived and tended. And I think, over the years, I've had clients come to see me in therapy who have been diligently and genuinely inquiring, also spiritual teachers, inquiring into and working with patterns of thinking, cognitive restructuring as a way to heal or transform early trauma or any other type of soul wounding, early ruptures and attachment, whatever it might be, relational wounding, emotional wounding. And they just weren't able to get at the real core of what was going on, despite a certain amount of clarity and insight, about thoughts and beliefs that seemed to be driving so much of their experience. And to the extent that it went, it was all very accurate. It was very valid. The reality is, though, at least again in my experience, that the lost orphans of psyche and soma, the personifications of the unlived life, aren't reachable through conceptual thinking alone, through cognitive insight, through clarity, through understanding. They're hidden. They're hidden in the shadow. They're tucked away in bodily and subcortical circuitry, in our muscles, in our cell tissue, in our patterns of breathing, and require a more subtle and a more sensitive tincture to really illuminate and to release them. And in working with practitioners, teachers, and therapists over the years who are quite skilled at a conceptual-based inquiry, we would sometimes discover quite a lot of unconscious material in the physical body, in the emotional body, held in the shadow that just wasn't being accessed and illuminated, and therefore not metabolized or liberated by way of a thought-based practice. And so I don't see that as a fault of those techniques and approaches. They're fine and effective at what they do, but it's important to realize that any one method is not going to be sensitive enough to enter into the secret places and to make the darkness conscious.